Well, hey everybody, thank you for joining Michael and I today for our presentation on cybersecurity. It's going to take about 45 minutes to get through the presentation. We're going to go over 10 threats every person in business faces and how to fight them now. Again, I am Jeremy Joyner, Senior Wealth Advisor.
My name is Michael Wellings. I'm the Director of Communications and Financial Planner.
So we've got a lot to cover, but before we get going, we want to tell you a little bit about our firm. So we've got a lot of folks on this presentation that aren't clients of this firm, and we also have clients, and so if you're a client, you're probably familiar with this. If you're not, we want to tell you a little bit about what we do. So we are a registered investment advisory firm. We were established, Dick Gerbach and Susie Gerbach founded this firm in 1985. We are a fee-only firm, and we focus on providing comprehensive and goals-driven advice. We specialize in retirement income planning. We have a very detailed process in which we go through to make sure folks stay retired if they desire to retire. And of course, we also help with the investment management. We utilize some of the top money managers in the world and partner with one of the best custodians in the world to do that. So if you have any more desire to learn more about our firm, check out our website. It's down below there, askstrategicadvisory.com. And of course, you're always welcome to give us a call, and we'll share our phone number with you at the end of this presentation. So let's dive right in. So if you're like most people, you've probably stayed at a Marriott, you've probably done some sort of business with Equifax, they're a credit reporting firm, and you might have had a Yahoo account at some point, whether it was a Yahoo Mail account or something like that. But when you look back in the last several years, there's been some major data breaches. 500 million guests had their information stolen from Marriott. 143 million Americans affected by an Equifax breach. And of course, 3 billion Yahoo users. In our room alone, between Michael and I, we have checked the box on all three of those. And so these are only in the last 3 years. So given these statistics, it's likely that your information, our information, has landed in the hands of a hacker. So these new threats are exposed every day. Even as we sit here right now, there are bad people attempting to break the walls of your networks, obtain your information, and take over your identity. And we know this sounds a bit dramatic, but we're talking about some very serious things. You're dealing with usernames and passwords, social security numbers. They can open credit cards in your name. They can drain bank accounts and, of course, seize your computer and hold it for ransom. We call that ransomware. So we have a big challenge ahead of us. The authors of a book called Cybersecurity and Cyber War contend that we are at a world war, and it's underway as we speak. And the biggest problem we face is a cybersecurity knowledge gap. It's not that we can't defend ourselves, it's just that most people don't know how or don't take the time to do so. And of course, that's why we're here. So as we walk through this presentation, we're going to cover 3 parts. Part 1 is discovering your cybersecurity score. Part 2, learn the new cybersecurity rules. And part 3, of course, taking action. As I mentioned earlier, if you have questions, as we go through this presentation, there is a chat box down below. Feel free to type that question into that box, and if we can answer it, we will. We don't know all the answers right off the top of our heads, so we might have to do a little research to help you out. And of course, at the end of this presentation, we're going to ask you to fill out an action pledge. We encourage you to pick 3 actions to do right away and execute and move forward, just to help protect your cyber identity. So let's get started. So discovering your score. As a follow-up to this presentation, you're going to get something called a cybersecurity quiz. It's 10 questions. You go through and answer each question, and the higher score you have, the better you are at protecting your cyber identity. And of course, the lower score you have, probably the better attention you need to pay to this presentation today. But I think you'll find that even the most skilled cybersecurity expert, there's a few things you can do differently as we go through this. So let's get started. We're going to talk about 3 cybersecurity mindsets. They are secrecy, omniscience, and mindfulness. And we're going to cover each 3 of these mindsets as we go through this presentation. Now, each mindset alone provides a greater cybersecurity, but when you kind of combine all 3 and you find that sweet spot, you really help secure yourself well.
Mm-hmm. So it's no secret that we all need some more secrecy in our lives, and that's why our first key idea is just that, secrecy. Adopting a new level of secrecy can boost your security and cyber confidence. So the secrecy mindset entails keeping your personal and private data simply that, private. With all these massive amounts of data breaches suffered by corporations and governments, we need to act as if our personal data already exists in the hands of cyber criminals because, as we spoke about earlier, it likely already does. We all really need to draw a tighter ring of security around our own personal data, and that starts with your email. Our email address is the key to our digital lives. We share it with countless businesses, organizations, and people. And really, if you've used the internet for any amount of time, you've most likely entered your email address at a host of online accounts. You know, whether it's for shopping, traveling, exercising, dating, we don't really think twice before we put it in there. But having your email addresses in so many databases puts you at a significant risk. As we've demonstrated, hackers routinely breach the security networks of many organizations that hold your primary email address. That stolen personal data, paired with poor email security, has the potential to really lead to disaster. Robert Siciliano, he's the CEO of IdentityTheftSecurity.com and a security writer, explains that it has been said that if you own a person's email, you own the person. This means that once your email is hacked, pretty much your entire digital life is up for grabs. So even if you've done your due diligence and you have all your passwords being different, if your email is hacked and it's associated with your other online accounts, this hacker could simply use a reset password and get access to all your other accounts. So to complement that, take the story of professor and software security expert, Mr. Herbert Thompson. Thompson bet a friend of his that he could hack into her bank account. And so with her permission, he began. He first simply Googled her name. And when he perused that Google search, he stumbled upon her blog that she kept. And on that blog, she had an old resume. So from the blog, he also got her personal email address and her old college email address from her resume. So now he's well on his way. He's got 2 email addresses. Thompson was able to use the Forgot My Password feature on her college email account to get in using the personal information listed on her resume. Once he reset that password, he was able to reset her current email address, having the link sent to her college email. So you can kind of see the chain that follows here. And so once he was in her personal email, he could reset her online banking password, and the jig was up. Now, you really might not care if somebody hacks into your Food Network account or your Yelp account, but you most certainly do not want your online banking exposed in the same way. So this is why you need to create a separate secret email for your financial accounts. And this email address should be unidentifiable. Don't use your first name. Don't use your last name. Don't use your initials or your birthday or your birth month or other identifying information. It should also be protected by a strong and unique password. Having a separate email address reduces your digital footprint, and if your primary non-financial email address is exposed in a hack, it's not going to be connected to your financial accounts. So you can see this is a key step in boosting your security. Now on the subject of passwords, as we said, our email addresses need to be protected by good, strong passwords. But here's the problem. We all face something called the password paradox, which is just this. Easy to remember passwords are easy to break. Hard to remember passwords are hard to break. So you can see that each of us has a problem. Many passwords in reality are child's play for hackers to get through. Computing power nowadays gets stronger with each passing year, and that means that the bad guys can figure out your password in no time flat, because the reality is a hacker isn't just sitting in front of a keyboard banging out one password after another. He's got a computer with algorithms running hundreds of different passwords every second. So I'm going to ask you right now, how long do you think it takes a computer to crack 1,000 weak passwords? The answer? Just 17 minutes. That is it. And one reason for this is that people choose passwords that have less than 6 characters, or they use names or dictionary words or other common passwords like password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if that's you right now, just make a mental note to go and change your passwords later. We're going to go over some key tips on that here in a moment. But right now I want to take the time to tell you about another person, a creative director named Mauricio Estrella, who took this password paradox problem head on. So following his divorce, Estrella wanted to focus on the positive aspects of his life. So instead of being annoyed when he had to change his password every 30 days for work, Estrella decided to make a challenge. Every 30 days, he would choose a new goal and turn that into his password. For example, his first password was forgive at H3R, which spells forgive her. And this was directed towards his ex-wife. And after 30 days, Estrella changed his password to quit smoking forever. And he did. Estrella found a way to take the ordinary password and improve his life with it. But there are other ways to think about passwords. You could create a mnemonic phrase with some numbers or symbols thrown in. Or another example is I personally know a woman who takes the first line of a prayer she says every day, and she uses the first letter of each of the first 10 words of the prayer as her password. If you threw in some numbers and symbols, you could have an even stronger password. Or you could, use a poem, you could use song lyrics, you can do a phrase. Or another method we want to speak about is called the diceware method. Here, you roll a dice 5 times and you record each number each time you throw it. So repeat that process 4 more times so that you have 5 5-digit numbers. Then you go to www.diceware.com and match your 5-digit numbers to a list that they have of over 7,700 words. And those random 5 words become your password. Now I know what you're thinking. You have so many accounts, and if you want to make a strong password for each account, how in the world are you going to remember every single one of those passwords? Well, there's a method to doing that. We recommend using a password manager. Well, what is a password manager? Well, it's a piece of software that stores all of your passwords in an encrypted file stored on your computer or in the cloud, and this particular file is protected with a master password. The only password you're going to have to remember is this master password, but of course, you're going to want that password to be as strong as possible.
So we use a password manager called Dashlane.
We do.
Here in our office. We find it very effective. It's not without its quirks every now and then, but it, for generating strong passwords, storing those, it is quite effective. And once you have good, strong passwords, then you should take the next step, particularly with your email, online banking, social media, and others. And the next step is what we call two-step verification. So it's an extra layer of security. It's not that new, but I'd say it's relatively new, and it should be added to any account that supports the technology. So with this approach, when you start to log into an account online, you're sent a short-lived one-time passcode. Usually that is sent to you via text message, and so then you look at that text message and then type in the code into the actual website that you're trying to get into. Now, most of us have used this, but we find it annoying, but it is an extremely good level of security. Even better with the two-step verification system is using something called an authenticator app. It is the most secure option because it's more difficult for hackers to compromise. Some popular versions are Google Authenticator and Microsoft Authenticator. And so this method stops you from getting hacked because it requires 2 things. Well, something you should know, your password, and then something you have, the temporary code. So as long as that hacker does not have your phone and can't get access to your text messages, there's very little chance they're going to get into that account. So you'll be alerted if someone's trying to break in. You get one of these alerts, you recognize, you know what, I'm not in Fort Lauderdale spending such and such money. That doesn't make sense to me. You can make a phone call to your bank or your credit card company and then quickly
diffuse the
situation. So there's 2 forms. And so if you don't have to worry about entering a code every time you log into your account from your device. You can designate some devices as safe devices where you only need to enter that code once every 30 days when logging in. That's fine. No issues there. But after every 30 days, it is a good idea to make sure and go through that process again.
Mm-hmm.
We all use Wi-Fi, and periodically we may use public Wi-Fi. So if you're at an airport or if you're at a hotel, sometimes restaurants, coffee shops, places like that, you can get free internet. Well, that internet sometimes comes with a severe cost. They're completely open, and hackers can gain access to anything you do while you're connected. So your email, if you check your bank accounts, maybe your credit card numbers, you see the pattern here. It could be very bad. So when you're connected to a free public Wi-Fi, absolutely do not make or do any financial transactions or check your email. Don't do it. Instead, use your smartphone. If you have an iPhone or an Android, use that as a hotspot. So when you do, you'll be using your private data through a private network rather than the public wireless network, or simply just use your phone over broadband regular data. That is actually a very secure method for checking those things. Just don't use a public Wi-Fi network. And if you want to go above and beyond and you do this as a regular thing where you're checking and you're in airports or you're traveling, use something called a virtual private network, or VPN. It's a bit technical and you probably have to hire somebody to help set that up, but this device helps create a very secure private Wi-Fi network for yourself anywhere you are. So not only you're probably using more Wi-Fi at home than you are in public, and your home Wi-Fi network can be just as vulnerable as a public network if you haven't gone through some steps to secure it. So it can open doors to you and your family's digital life if your router is not properly protected. So there's 4 things you've got to do to lock down your router and Wi-Fi network from hackers. Now, some of these are more technical, and if it sounds discouraging, I encourage you to reach out to a tech person in your life, and certainly they can probably help you accomplish this. But so you'll have to log into your router's IP address. If you do not know this IP address, you typically can find it in your user manual or by searching the make and model of your router online. With that IP address, then you can go about changing the default username and password. So when you subscribe to AT&T Internet or Comcast or InTouch, whatever you subscribe to, and they provide you with a router. Well, that router is going to come with the default username and password. You've got to change that. So hackers know this, and they can use that to get into your network. So pick a strong password, going back to the password discussion we had. Now then, encrypt your router. That's the next step. Select the strongest encryption method you can. That would be WPA or WPA2. Now, WEP, I know these are a lot of acronyms, but WEP is a form of encryption, but it is no longer considered secure. If your router only allows WEP encryption, get a new router, because it does not. And I think most modern routers through Comcast, AT&T, and things like that will have WPA or WPA2 encryption capabilities. And so step 3, not finally, but step 3, disable your Wi-Fi protected setup. So this feature allows others to quickly connect to your network with a short passcode rather than having the whole password. Disable that. That passcode is very easy for hackers to guess at. A computer system can knock that out pretty quick. So if you don't have the option to disable that, make sure you see if you can limit the number of attempts a person can make when trying to log in. Therefore, when their computer system tries that attempt 3, 4, 5 and gets up into the hundreds trying to guess at that passcode, it'll eventually just kick them off. And lastly, update your router's firmware. So firmware, it's basically a fancy word for software. When you get or receive your router, typically it's outdated. And as we'll go through, outdated software leaves patches, it leaves holes where hackers can gain access. So updating that firmware, it's not that daunting of a task. It's fairly easy. Just grab the instruction manual, and it should be something you can follow step by step if you haven't done so. Okay, we're going to jump into key idea number 2. So completing certain actions can help you achieve financial cyber omniscience and thwart fraud. So omniscience, what is that? Well, it's all knowingness. So when we say financial omniscience, what we're saying is knowing what's going on at all times in your financial world. It basically puts you at the center, so you're not at the mercy of things you can't control. It starts with using technology so you're totally aware of what funds are leaving your account or being charged to your account at all times. I can't emphasize how helpful this tip is that we're going to go into. It's something that my family uses. It's something that I know several, Dick Gerback and his family uses. If somebody uses our family's debit card, whether it's my wife's or mine, or a credit card, we get an immediate text alert that a purchase has been charged, and it'll tell the location and the business it's been charged at. And if you know, well, I'm not at that business, or I haven't gone to that website, you know immediately, uh-oh, something's wrong. And you can be proactive and call that the credit card company or your bank, let them know that there's something going on, and get that card closed and shut down quickly. So simply, you can go online, go into the settings typically and your online access. In the settings, there'll be something called alerts. Click on alerts, and in there it will ask you how you want to be alerted. You can set up it to be a text message, and then go about executing that. That way you know at all times when money is moving in and out of your accounts. So now we're going to move on. We're going to talk about credit reports. Your credit report is an open file. That means anyone with enough information can impersonate you, open a new line of credit in your name, and wreck your financial life for an extended period of time. They don't need a lot of data. They need your legal name, social security number, maybe some employment history, and probably address, sometimes a driver's license number. Believe it or not, you've probably given that information out to many different organizations, and if they are hacked, it's now in the hands of a criminal. And so by putting a credit freeze on your credit file, it locks your credit file down, where the only way a credit bureau or a lender or somebody you're trying to do business with can actually access that file is with a PIN, a password that only you know. So you have to go about setting this credit freeze up at each of the 3 credit bureaus: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. You have to call each of them individually, let them know you want to establish a credit freeze, and then that you'll assign a PIN to that. Make sure you remember that, and therefore nobody can open a line of credit or any other type of credit account without you knowing about it. The good news is per federal law now, it is free. They can't charge you for doing that. Now, don't get this confused with a fraud alert. A fraud alert is simply reactive. That is something that would be placed on your credit report if you've experienced fraud. It really doesn't accomplish anything. I'm assuming it just makes the credit card company less liable, or the credit reporting agency less liable if something happens. But a credit freeze is what you need to establish. And now I'm going to blindside you with something. Your kids have an identity. Your kids have a credit report, and that's a problem because you're probably not checking it. Now, it has become a common thing for hackers, for identity thieves to target your children, our children, open lines of credit in their name, and basically wreck their credit and create a world of headache for mom and dad. Now, why do they target? Because you're not looking at it. So it can go on for years before it's even noticed. So what you've got to do as parents is you've got to work with each of the 3 credit bureaus. Again, that's Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. You've got to send a letter with a copy of your child's birth certificate, listing you as the parent, a copy of your driver's license, and proof of your address, and ask them to run a manual search of your child's social security number. If they find no report, well, you're in luck. That means that your child has not been targeted. And you should do this periodically. If you do find that there's a report and you know that your child hasn't borrowed any money, then you need to quickly put a credit freeze on your child's record, and then go about getting it repaired. It's not an easy process, but it is a necessary one.
Our third cybersecurity key idea has to do with mindfulness. Achieving a sense of mindfulness when it comes to cybersecurity allows you to stay alert without becoming fatigued. So what exactly does that mean? Well, we need to be in a state of relaxed alertness when dealing with cybersecurity. As it turns out, fighter pilots have an acronym for this state called OODA, and it stands for Observation, Orientation, Decision, and Action. Zen masters also use the phrase mindfulness. And in fact, when Google completed their own analysis of worldwide cybersecurity practices, they also recommended mindfulness as a key part of cybersecurity. So really pay attention to this one, because mindfulness relates to your day-to-day cybersecurity practices. 9 out of 10 security experts say running updated software is necessary for strong security. Out-of-date software allows hackers to plant viruses and malicious software on your devices. Yet, 40% of computer users don't update their software in a timely fashion. What do I mean when I say this? Well, if you're using your computer and you get that little pop-up in the top right corner that says you need to update your software, you have the option of, remind me tomorrow, remind me in an hour. Don't click that. Just go ahead and update your software. You'll thank us later. Experts say that 75 to 80% of computer hacks they see relate to outdated software. And see, what they do, hackers, is exploit security holes in unpatched software, which allows them to install malware and viruses on your unprotected devices. And this malware, it could do a number of things. It could record everything you do, or worse yet, it could even kidnap your computer and hold it for ransom, which we're going to go into more detail in a minute. So you want to be sure that all your software, all your programs on all your devices are up to date. And this doesn't just include your operating system, Windows 7 or Mac OS X Mojave. This includes your browsers, your Internet Explorers, your Firefoxes, your Chromes. This includes Microsoft Office, Adobe programs, whatever programs you're using. The good news is that many programs allow you to enable auto updates. And if they do, then this is something you need to do ASAP. A good place to see if a program will allow this auto updating is in the security or settings tab of the program, or you could always just Google the name of the program and see if it auto updates. In that same vein of thought, it's also a really good idea to install a really good antivirus program on your computer. And of course, you will want to make sure that that is also up to date as well. It's also a best practice to periodically go through the programs on your devices and just uninstall anything you don't use. If you haven't used that program in several months or even a year, go ahead and delete it, because the fewer programs you have, the fewer holes hackers have to attack you from. So one of the types of malware I mentioned on the previous slide kidnaps your computer and holds it for ransom.
This is a bad one.
This is a bad one. This is one you really don't want to deal with. This is called ransomware, and it's one of the biggest, baddest threats today. In this attack, what hackers do is infect your device with malware that encrypts everything on your computer. What does that mean? That means that you can no longer access any of your files. And in order to get your files back, you have to pay the hackers a Bitcoin ransom. In order to avoid paying this ransom to the cyber crooks if this happens to you, you need to follow the rule of 3, meaning you need to back up all your files and data in 3 different places. First is on your computer or device that you have, just on your desktop or in your Documents tab, something similar. Next, you need to save a copy of your files and data to a physical backup device, like a thumb drive but bigger. And nowadays, they have devices that have terabytes of data, so you can fill that up if you tried.
They're not that expensive. They're actually fairly affordable.
They are. And lastly, you need to save your data to a cloud service like Dropbox or iCloud or OneDrive. And for those of you who don't know what the cloud is an internet-connected server that syncs up with your device. Now, ransomware attacks, they're normally spread through a method called phishing. Phishing messages or emails that impersonate a legitimate company or person, and they're designed to steal your personal information or install malware on your machine through a malicious link. Now, here's the bad news. Hackers are sending out an estimated 94 billion of these messages every single day. Now, it's true that most get caught in your spam filter, but some still find their way to your inbox. And our next story comes straight out of the White House, unfortunately. The wife of a Mr. John P. Holdren, who is assistant to former President Barack Obama and also the former director of White House Office of Science and Technology, that man's wife received an email which she believed to be from her husband. It asked for the password to their Xfinity phone and internet accounts. And Mrs. Holdren thought it was innocent enough, so she replied with the password and just went about her day. But she hadn't sent the password to her husband. Rather, she sent it to a political hacking group who, with the password, redirected all of the Holdren's phone calls to the Free Palestine movement line. So, haha, funny prank. The Holdrens joined a long list of victims, including but not limited to former CIA Director John Brennan and former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Some prestigious men in that company.
We'll pause for dramatic effect there.
Had Holdren's wife known about the 10-second email rule we're about to teach you, she might not have fallen for the scam. So what is this 10-second email rule? Well, first off, email is an acronym, E-M-A-I-L, and it stands for Examine Message and Inspect Links. Let's take it one step at a time, break it down from a fundamental standpoint. The first half of the acronym examine message. Starts with the subject line. So what phishers will try and do is to get us to react quickly to an urgent situation. Often they're going to make the subject line something really scary and frightening, like warning or account closed or you owe the IRS money, which, by the way, is always a scam. The IRS will never email you. They will never call you. They will always send you mail. So quick tip. Some are more subtle, but still require you to take action. For example, you could get a subject line that says mail delivery failed, or return message to sender, or incoming fax received. Subject lines like this should alert us, should set off your radar that this might be a phishing attack. Next, we need to discover the true sender of the email. More bad news is that phishers can spoof the from line in an email to appear to be from a legitimate business or legitimate organization. What you can do to determine the true sender is hover your mouse over the display name. A small box is going to appear, and what's in that box is the true email address. Other suspicious things to look out for include greetings that refer to you as customer or sir or madam or other impersonal addresses. Our own Dick Gerback, he has a trick like this. His first name is Richard, but he knows that if he's ever approached and it's to Richard, that automatically sets off his radar. So if you have something like that, just be on the lookout. Other tells are false or poor grammar or a vague signature line with false contact information. And this next point I cannot emphasize enough. You should always be suspicious of unsolicited emails with attachments. Never, under any circumstances, click to open an unsolicited attachment, because what might present itself as a receipt or an invoice or a payment could end up being a file that plants a virus on your computer or seizes it for ransom.
And there's no doubt that is the most common way ransomware will be installed on your computer. Is through an unsolicited email attachment. So simply, if you don't know who's sending it, delete it. So the second part of our email rule, the 10-second email rule, has to do with the links in the message. So if you've confirmed that the sender is legitimate, you still have to evaluate any hyperlinks in that message. So let me give you an example. So British journalist Jane Corbin, she's less than an hour away from an important deadline for a documentary she was working on, and doing a lot of things at once, she suddenly spotted an email from Yahoo. We've all received those. It told her to confirm her account details immediately or her account would be shut down. Well, she's under a lot of pressure. She's trying to get some important documents in her email, and so she clicked on the link, and knowing that she had to have access, she filled in her personal information, and immediately her screen goes blank. She'd been phished, and she has ransomware on her computer now. So the phishers then attacked the new targets, Corbin's email contacts. So more than 1,000 people in her email address book received an email from her account, from her, saying that she was robbed at a hotel in Spain and needed money. Now, we don't know whether or not any of her contacts actually sent money, but we do know she was locked out of her computer, forced to close all of her banking accounts, and spend a considerable amount of time trying to repair the damage that caused. If she'd have just waited 10 seconds, examined the Yahoo message more closely, she could have prevented this, saved herself the embarrassment and time that comes with a phishing attack like that. So again, the second half of the email acronym is inspect links. It requires you to look and inspect those links within the message. Simply hover your mouse over the hyperlinked text and you will see the URL and where it is directing you to. The URL is anything www dot and wherever it's going. Now, I will still caution you. You still have to be careful. It could even look like a legitimate URL. It could be just one letter missing. Instead of Yahoo, it's YAHO instead of two O's. You've got to be diligent on that. Here's the best way I think going about it. We all receive hundreds of emails every day. If it's not from somebody you know emails you regularly, some organization you trust implicitly, simply don't open it, delete it, get rid of it, because it might be something that's going to cause a lot of damage in your life. So finally, we've got to take action. We've covered a lot of data in this presentation. And what we encourage you to do is, as a part of your follow-up materials, we're going to include an action plan commitment. And that commitment, we encourage you to find 3 things that you feel you should do better. Pick those 3 things, write them down, put it on your refrigerator, and make it a habit. Your cyber life is habitual. The way you check email, the way you check your bank accounts, it's all habitual. And if we do these things regularly enough, they become habit, and therefore you're much, much safer with your cyber online practices.
So while you finish up your action plan, I just wanted to point out a couple other resources at your disposal. Number one, on the screen, it's a book called Hack Proof Your Life Now, The New Cybersecurity Rules. And good news, it's available on Amazon. Even better news, we have some copies here at the office that we would be more than happy to mail to you. So if you'd like a copy of this, send us an email, type it in the question box, give us a call, whatever you like. It's a great book. We've drawn a lot of inspiration for this presentation from this book. It's great. Occasionally, we also have an email that goes out bi-weekly, and there's also some cybersecurity tips that occasionally go out on that. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Okay, so we just want to reintroduce you to the team here at Strategic Advisory Services. Dick Gerback founded the firm, as we said, in 1985, and his lovely wife, Susie, myself and Michael and Pam, our Director of First Impressions, and last but certainly not least, Emily Wellings, a financial planner who recently passed her, well, not that recently, but recently passed her CFP exam. So we're very proud of her, and we're proud of the team we have here. As a part of the follow-up materials, we're going to include an evaluation. We want to know how you felt about this presentation, the material, whether or not we bored you to death, or whether there's something we can improve upon, or if we simply did a good job. We want to hear that. So we're going to send you an email with that. You can just mail that or fax it or email it back to us. That would be outstanding. I promise you we won't hound you to get it back. No. But I do encourage you, go visit our website, askstrategicadvisory.com. If you're interested in our specialty, retirement distribution planning, there's a video on our homepage that goes through a detailed outline of our process and how we go about it. Go check out our blog. In our blog, we cover all kinds of financial topics, from cybersecurity, like we're talking about today, to Medicare, to Social Security, to investment management. It's all there.
As a matter of fact, this presentation is going to be on our blog at askstrategicadvisory.com for the next 30 days. So I know what you had today is kind of like drinking from a fire hydrant. So if you want to go back, refresh yourself on some topics, it'll be up there for 30 days. Tell your friends about it. It's some great stuff we know. And be on the lookout for some invitations to our next webinar happening July 25th. We're going to be discussing Medicare, specifically a baby boomer's guide to Medicare. So we know this is an issue that affects so many people, and it's a really complicated issue. So we're going to do our best to clear these muddied waters a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Have a great weekend coming up. Have a great July 4th. We look forward to hearing from you. Take care.